Okay, everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because you are from around the world. So welcome to the TESOL Intercultural Communication Interest section. My name is Daniela Silva, and I'm the co-chair of the interest section, this interest section this year with Mina. And we're organizing this webinar. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this group, this organization, but you're part of the TESOL International Association. And our goal is to collaborate with TESOL professionals to advance intercultural understanding through communication and English language education, right? So our mission is to cultivate a critical and reflective discussion of cultural studies and interculturality within English language teaching and learning. And you organize, a lot of activities throughout the year. You're organizing this webinar, but also there's a more formal, but also you organize more informal events such as informal coffee hours, where you can discuss on the topic and it's more like a conversation. Lightning talks, we have more like junior scholars that they have 5 minutes to share their research and get feedback. We have a newsletter that you can follow us, as you read that and contribute to our newsletter and many more activities. Okay, so if you want to keep up with what we do, we have your own social media. You can follow us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, X. We have a YouTube channel with past videos of the events that we have organized, and the video from today will be posted over there as well. If you're TESOL affiliated, you can join us and choose our interest section, and you post our updates over there too. If you're not a TESOL affiliated yet, so this is a good time to have TESOL affiliated. And you can go to the TESOL Association website and get more information how you can join the organization. And for today, we have Dr. Sarah Hopkins, who is an assistant professor lecturer at International Education Institute at University of St. Andrews. And she will be talking about decolonizing educationscapes in EMI contexts. Sarah has already written 2 books. She has written many journal articles, book chapters on this topic, but also on translanguaging, global English, linguistic landscape, English medium in higher education, and many topics on research conducted in United Arab Emirates. So we have to have Sarah with us today. And without further ado, Sarah, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and I'm very happy to be here. I'll share my screen. So I actually did record my speech earlier this morning, so I'm going to play it, but I'm here the whole time, and then we'll answer questions at the end. It's around 35 minutes, the talk, and then there'll be time for questions at the end. Okay. Welcome to my presentation. Today, I'm going to be talking about decolonizing educationscapes in EMI contexts. So first, I'll just give you an overview of what you can expect from this presentation. I'll start by looking at the decolonizing lens. I'll then look at English medium education in multilingual university settings. I'll talk about the context of my study, which is in the UAE, and its linguistic ecology. I'll then talk about linguistic hybridity in the UAE and how it relates to decolonizing. And I'll then present some findings from a study I conducted, which is an ethnographic study of a UAE educationscape. I'll share the findings and I'll conclude with some implications and recommendations. So decolonizing is a very hot topic at the moment. It's become more and more common to see it as a subject for books and for articles across many different disciplines. So you can see on this screen here just a selection, just a handful of books that use the concept of decolonizing in their titles. And this spans so many different disciplines. So we can see decolonizing ethnography, decolonizing wellness, education, methodologies, maps, trauma work, museums, journalism, childhoods, the body, design, and politics. Before we talk about decolonizing in the context of EMI universities, it's important to define what decolonization is and what it isn't. So it is not a static condition, and it's not an individual attribute or a lineal point of arrival, but rather decolonization seeks to make visible, open up and advance radically different perspectives and possibilities of existence, analysis and thought. And in this sense, decolonizing aims to decouple aspects of life from the legacy of colonialism. To look at how decolonizing affects wider society and how it then moves to the EMI university context, or how they relate. We can see the picture on the left here. This was a picture I took when I was in Victoria, Canada, 2 years ago now. So it was the end of COVID. I was there for a sabbatical. I have citizenship of Canada and also the UK, so was able to spend my sabbatical in BC, in British Columbia. And what was really interesting at the time was seeing the huge decolonizing movement that was taking place there and also globally. But this is a picture taken in Victoria of a Captain Cook statue that had been destroyed and covered with red handprints, so red paint and handprints. And you can see the words decolonize are written at the bottom of the statue. So it is a highly topical and regularly featured concept in the news, and it has become somewhat of a buzzword in recent years. And the removal of imperial and slave trader statues is one way to decolonize urban landscapes, and this has a powerful and immediate impact. It's quite shocking in a way. There were crowds gathered around this statue and lots of people taking pictures and lots of people talking about it. However, in the realm of education, deeper and more multi-layered and complex decolonizing approaches are needed, especially related to the world's many English medium universities. So I'd like to start by introducing the topic of decolonizing in educational contexts with this quote from the author Nisha Dolan's novel, Exciting Times. So in this novel, the main character is Ava, who is an Irish teacher teaching in the Hong Kong context, teaching English. And she had many social observations when she was working in this context, and this is one. I'd comment on the learning materials. The illustrations were of white children braving weather conditions that would never occur near the equator. We branded a mistake any usage that might hint a Hong Konger was from Hong Kong. So here she's commenting on the Western-centric materials in the textbooks that she's using, and also how the English language was seen as a proxy to whiteness, and also the lack of acceptance of global Englishes or world Englishes in this context. And this refers to the native speaker norm, put native speaker in quote marks here. So before we talk more about EMI or English medium education in multilingual university settings, what constitutes an EMI setting? So the definition is fourfold. Firstly, it's English for instructional purposes. English itself is not the subject being taught. Language development is not the primary intended outcome. And English is usually the second language for most learners. EMI is on the rise globally due to globalization, internationalization, and neoliberal ideologies, which equate English with social capital, prestige, and success on the job market. EMI policies in educational contexts aim to equip students with English as a lingua academia and to produce neoliberal subjects who will boost university rankings. But often larger issues are overlooked, such as the need to foster students' translingual identities, culture, and belonging in transnational university spaces. As knowledge concerns embodied, effective social and cultural learning that draws from and transforms environmental and geopolitical spaces, whole university ecosystems, including schoolscapes or educationscapes, are important to consider. A more expansive term, rather than talking about EMI, is English medium education in multilingual university settings, because this focuses not only on the I in EMI, which is instruction, but also on the wider educationscape, which is the language in the university space, or the linguistic landscape or semiotic landscape of the university space, as well as research being produced by faculty at the university and social spaces. So to give you a brief overview of the study context, the study takes place in the UAE, and the UAE doesn't share the same formal colonial past as Hong Kong, but it does have a semi-colonial or informal colonial past because it was the trucial states before it became a nation in 1971, and this was a British protectorate from 1892 to 1971. Multilingualism has mushroomed because of waves of migration, oil wealth, and fast-paced development and globalization. And now 88.5% of the population are foreign residents that come from almost 200 countries and who collectively speak over 100 languages. English is used as a lingua franca together with Arabic, and higher education in the UAE is dominated by EMI. The linguistic landscape or the linguistic ecology of the UAE is quite complex. We can see this diagram here showing the components. So there are, as I mentioned before, many languages, over 100 different languages spoken in the UAE context, with the two main languages being English and Arabic. But within Arabic, there's lots of diversity because it's a diglossic language. So there's classical Arabic, MSA, modern standard Arabic, and Khaliji dialects or local Emirati dialects. And how Emiratis use their linguistic repertoires varies greatly depending on diglossia and also their varied schooling backgrounds. So whether they went to an EMI school or an AMI school. Also, translingual practice, or in some cases mainly using English, is common amongst younger Emiratis, especially if they attended English medium international or private schools. But attitudes towards linguistic hybridity or excessive English use leads to nicknames such as prestige boy, which is prestige boy, but because of the Arabic lack of distinction between B and P, or the B and P sound, it comes as prestige boy. And also the concept of chicken nuggets. This Wafa Alawari talks about this in her article, which I highly recommend, which is in Language and Society. But it's the concept of nicknaming Gulf students in the Gulf, including the UAE, as chicken nuggets. So here they're seen as westernized speakers who mainly speak English instead of Arabic. So it's a nickname that slightly has negative connotations, but is used widely. Also, a relevant concept to the UAE is the third space, which often emerges amongst translingual individuals where notions of belonging are complex and multi-layered. So to look at linguistic hybridity in the UAE, there are four main types. The first is code switching, which is common all over the world, which is the swapping between two or more systems of language. There's also translanguaging, which is also a global phenomenon, which involves multilingual speakers using a combination of languages or semiotic resources to aid communication. And here languages are used fluidly within a sentence, so there's almost no distinction between the languages. They all come together to create a translingual dialogue, as you can see in this example here. So congrats, Wala, you deserve it. Alf Mabruk to you and mashallah. So here the speaker is combining Arabic and English very fluidly. And this type of sentence is more effective in the local context if speakers have knowledge of both languages. There's also the concept of white dialects, and this is a regional concept, and it's when two speakers of Arabic may be using different regional dialects will find middle ground, and they will purposely change their Arabic dialects to find middle ground to avoid using English as a lingua franca. There's also Arabisi, which is regional, and this is the use of Roman letters and numbers to represent Arabic sounds in informal writing. And usually these are used to produce sounds that don't exist in Arabic. Sorry, that don't exist in English. So the number 7 will represent the aspirated H, for example, in the word wahid. Sometimes Arabisi is used in popular art. So you can see here a poster using the 7-Up logo, which is using Arabisi, and the message is the most precious father. There are different attitudes towards the use of translingual repertoires. In popular culture and social media, it tends to be accepted as creative, clever, or charming. As you can see some examples here on t-shirt designs and greeting cards. So no pain, no gain, good afternoon, and haha, so funny, and hello, Habibi, or hello, darling. In EMI higher education, though, the same use of translingual repertoires is viewed differently, tends to be devalued, frowned upon, and associated with a guilty feeling. So why is translingual practice rejected in higher education contexts? It tends to be due to monolingual ideologies. And why do monolingual ideologies exist in the region? For many reasons. One is that the symbolism of English and Arabic tends to be quite different. So in previous research of mine, when asked in which domains do they associate English and Arabic with, then often they tend to be associated with completely different areas. So English tends to be associated with education, the future, the wider world, technology, whereas Arabic tends to be associated with religion, family, friends, home. So the framing of languages as well in linguistic landscapes on signage, for example, tends to be presented as two solitudes. So two versions of the same sign in two different languages, not mixed together. And the linguistic distance between English and Arabic is quite big because they are written in different scripts and from different directions. Also, English-only policies tend to frame translanguaging as taboo, and this reinforces double monolingual ideologies, where both languages are seen as valuable, but only if used separately. And this, in turn, can cause guilty multilingualism, where it's very common to use translingual practice, but there's a sense of guilt attached to this practice. So the study setting is a large government university in the UAE, which has campuses in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And at the time when the study took place in 2002, the sides were the male and the female side. The males and females were segregated, gender segregated. So they studied on two different sides of the campus. And the students are mainly Emirati, with Arabic as their first language and English as their second language. And faculty at the university are from a wide range of countries. So 2 research questions were addressed. How are languages and semiotics used in the university educationscape? And what are university students' perspectives on their educationscape with regard to linguistic inclusion, belonging, and identities? To do the study, it involved many steps. The first was a walking ethnography. So here, I, as the researcher, did 2 walks of the campus. This is the Abu Dhabi campus, taking pictures and observing the interaction with faculty and staff. So the first walk was at 7 a.m. in the morning before students and faculty arrived. And I took 482 pictures of signs. The second walk was at 12:30 during the busiest time of the university day. And the purpose of this walk was to observe interaction with the schoolscape or educationscape, and to interview faculty and staff about specific signs that I didn't have access to, which involved Arabic and also some Mandarin Chinese on the signs. The second step was gaining students' perspectives by using the app Padlet, which is a virtual bulletin board. Here, what I did was I selected a certain number of signs from the collection of pictures that I'd taken, and I tried to represent different areas of the university and also different usages of language, so monolingual signs, bilingual signs, multilingual signs, and with signs with different functions as well. And I wanted to gain the interpretations of semiotic and linguistic landscapes as intertextual products, so that not just signs themselves, which were removed from students' identities, but rather looking at what these signs can tell us about students' identities and levels of belonging. So to do this, I posted a selection of signs on a Padlet, and I asked 28 third-year students to give their comments on these signs. And you can see at the top here, the instruction was, please express your thoughts and feelings on these signs around the university in terms of languages and images used. You can discuss languages, size, position, symbols, purpose, audience, sign maker, social context, and any other aspects you feel are important to comment on. So the participants were aged 19 to 26, and participation in this study was optional and anonymous. So key findings from the study, just to summarize quite briefly, you can see the key findings here, and I'm going to talk about each one individually with examples now. So the first theme was the dominance of English in the linguistic landscape. So generally, English was the most dominant language that you could see around the university, and this took the form of often monolingual signs just in English. So you can see one example here. This is a handwritten note that an administrator wrote, and her first language is Arabic, and she's addressing the students who are also Arabic speakers, but she chose to use only English. And the message reads, "I went to pray, I'll be back in 10 mins." Another example of the dominance of English can be seen in classroom signs. So outside every classroom, there is a label saying what type of classroom it is and what number it is. And these signs are only written in English, but there is also some Braille used, which is could be seen as a bilingual sign, but there's no Arabic there. Also, we see monolingualism on imported objects, such as this bin here you can see, or this garbage can, which is for recycling. And this could be only in English because maybe it was imported from the US or from another English-speaking nation. But it still sends out a sign that that only English is used and not Arabic. And perhaps more surprising than these other signs is a very detailed sign outside the Student Counselling Centre, which was produced by students only in English. So students commented on the Padlet that one student commented, "I think it's better if it's in both languages, English and Arabic." A second theme was side-by-side bilingualism, or two solitudes. And this is also, it also represents imbalanced bilingualism. So we can see on the left here, there's a sign which tells students not to enter a faculty washroom. It says "students not allowed" in English. And then an Arabic version of the sign is beneath in red. And students have commented on this, saying that it could be done in a more respectful way, and that the first sentence is quite brief, but the Arabic translation is more severe. So it says that the ID will be taken if they give, and they will give the student a warning if she enters without permission. And the students felt this should be more respectful. This could be seen when I analyze this sign. I feel it fits the concept of Michael Chestnut and co-researchers' concept of multilingual commanding urgency. So this is when multilingualism is used in a mainly English-only context to, not for inclusion purposes, but to warn certain segments of society against something. So it's used to command something. So this, I feel, is a good example of this, because most signs around on that corridor were only in English, but when they want to address students about something they should not be doing, then suddenly the sign is bilingual. We see another instance of imbalanced bilingualism in the second picture, and this is marking the floor. So you see a huge sign saying first floor in English, and a tiny amount of Arabic in the second smaller square sign that just says floor in Arabic. But students didn't, when they looked at this on the Padlet, they didn't pick up on this imbalance, but rather they just said it was very helpful to have the very large sign indicating that it was the first floor, because there are different ways of describing floors according to which country you're in. So some people would say ground floor, first floor. Others wouldn't have a ground floor, and first floor would be the ground floor. The third picture is a good example of cultural bias, and also the dominance of English or imbalanced bilingualism, because here we see the first sign is bilingual, a welcome sign, but the second sign is only in English, and it takes an English cultural concept, which is the Second World War posters, the keep calm and carry on posters, but they've adapted it for the library. And students also commented on this, on the Padlet, saying that they felt that the signs should be equal, so translations should be provided for both posters. A third theme was bottom-up translanguaging, so bottom-up meaning that students created the signs, not officials in the university. And these signs, you could see there was a large sculpture in the middle of the main social area of the university. And it was a sculpture or a language object that spelt the word happiness in big white letters. And students were encouraged to decorate this sign with messages relating to the word happiness. But it's really interesting to see that even though this is an EMI context, when students had the agency to leave their mark linguistically in the university context, and they didn't just use English, but they used Arabic, but they also used a combination of languages and many other languages and pictures. And they use these languages or this translingual practice to express themselves. So we can see here languages such as Mandarin Chinese, we can see Arabic English, we can see Portuguese, there was also some Russian and some Korean on this sign. A fourth theme was the notion of students creating third spaces and sticky places. So third spaces is a place in between English only and Arabic only places. And sticky places is a concept by Sarah Ahmed and later used by Badwin and Hall to describe places that are saturated with meaning and that tend to be repeated. Places with that have a special meaning because of sentimentality or the fact that they're so familiar. So they can be familiar for good reasons or familiar for negative reasons. But in the case of this theme at the university, it was mainly positive sticky places that were identified. So one example is you can see in the second picture here, the snack shop sign. So in the promenade, in the main social area of the university, there are many cafes and restaurants and shops, but most of them are imported from the West. So we have a Starbucks, you know, and also a cafe called Deb's Cafe. But one exception is Dukan, and Dukan is an Arabic word meaning grocery store, traditional grocery store, and it's been transliterated into English above. But when you go into Dukan, the menu is very local, so it has items that are that combine Arabic culture with Western culture. So you can see the menu here, but also the cups that they give out for Karak tea has a really translingual feeling to it. So you can see words in English like perfect, amazing, words in Arabic like the name of the store, Dukan in Arabic script, and Karak, which is a local tea. And you can see the hennaed hand as well, which is a traditional design you see here, which isn't used very often now, but it symbolizes tradition. And this could be identified as a sticky place because it's hugely popular with students. I would say more popular than the other cafes. It's a place of comfort. And also you can see students continuing traditional practices in the EMI space in this picture on the right. And here a student has taped to the wall a sign, the paper sign, saying, please forgive and this is a woman who has died recently. Please forgive this woman and be kind to her and let her be in heaven. Reward her for her pain and patience with sickness and make her grave a piece of heaven. And this is a traditional practice that used to be carried out in villages or in neighborhoods in the UAE, where people would post signs in the neighborhood if someone died, just giving their blessings. And so this has been continued even in the EMI university space. So the findings have revealed a range of different themes relating to the dominance of English, but also ways in which universities can be decolonized through students' actions and teachers' actions. So to give some implications, some broad implications and recommendations that could be used across different EMI contexts. Through a decolonizing approach, linguistic hybridity needs to be seen and embraced and recognized as a social fact, rather than being associated with the emotion of guilt in educational domains. Moving beyond the critical transit era in classrooms, translanguaging in third spaces can be actively promoted in English medium schoolscapes for increased belonging and to counter double monolingual ideologies and to decolonize multilingualism. Although the aim of third spaces is to produce arenas where cultural and social differences can be negotiated and complex identities created, it's also recognized that no space is ever truly outside the powers that structure discourse. On a practical level, having students take part in critical linguistic landscape projects can help create a forum for change, with the aim of bridging the gap between English-only expectations and translingual identities. If you're interested in reading and listening to more about this topic, I have two books, one written based on my PhD study and another which is an edited volume. And although the topics are not solely on decolonizing EMI spaces, there are related topics in these books. And recently, my new university, the University of St Andrews in the UK, faculty from my department made a conceptual toolkit for language teaching practitioners, and they discuss with Ahmad Mahbub, who was a visiting scholar at the time, a range of different concepts, and one of them is decolonization. So if you're interested in listening to more on this topic, I recommend accessing this toolkit. It's a podcast, so you can listen to it while exercising or walking. Here are my references. And thank you. I will take questions now.
Thank you, Sarah. That's awesome. Does anybody have any question? I don't see any questions on the chat.
Sarah,
Go ahead.
Sarah, thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating, and the tips, and I would love to explore. Maybe you can elaborate some more on those, on the tips and the recommendations. But I did have a very simple question: is that podcast about the toolkit? That sounded really interesting. How do we access that? Is that something we should search for by name?
Yeah, I'll just share it again, just so it's easy to show you on the slide. Actually, sorry, I'll share the PowerPoint, not the recording, because it will be easier to show you that way. Yeah, so you can see can you see my screen?
Not right now.
No, okay. Sorry, just one moment. Okay, you can see it now. Can you?
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So should we
So
look for it by name?
yeah, it's I could put the website link into the chat, but I would have
Okay.
to spend a few minutes finding it. But
Yeah. So maybe later. Yeah.
yeah, I
Thanks.
could put it in the chat a little later, but if you
Okay.
do Google St Andrews Conceptual Toolkit for Language Teaching Practitioners, then it should come up, and it's free to anyone who goes to the page, and each discussion they're very long. Actually, they're around 2 hours, and they involve a conversation between around 5 faculty members for each of the topics. You can see the topics on the top here, language, and then dynamic practice, and then ideology, decolonization, and identity. So quite interesting topics and discussions from a range of different viewpoints. Yeah.
Thank you. And it looks like that Daniela and Roxana have put the link in the chat. So thank you all. That sounds fascinating, and what a fantastic product of, a result of your work.
Well, actually, the toolkit, I'm not involved with it because I joined the
Okay.
university only recently, and this took place before I joined. But I was really interested in these discussions, so it does relate. It's more of a general discussion on these issues. The discussions don't relate to the UAE context, but yeah.
Thanks, Leslie. Sorry, I have a question. So from the student's perspective, so how comfortable they feel like speaking, both languages or 2 or more languages? Because I think
Yeah.
we talk a lot about from the institution perspective, like what you see, but from the students, do they feel comfortable in speaking English, or they prefer speaking like we use more Arabic? What have you noticed?
Yeah, so it is an EMI context, and in the UAE, it's a very linguistically diverse society. So the students are used to hearing a lot of different languages in society, but also their English level is quite high, really, because they're studying through the medium of English. But their first language, because it's a government university, all the students are from the UAE, so they're all Emiratis, and so their first language is Arabic. So it's more about often in EMI spaces, the emphasis is on English and English only. But what I believe and what I think comes through the research is the importance of embracing students' authentic linguistic identities in the space, because that's part of who they are, and that should also be present in the university.
Okay, good. Thank you. You have Shifa? Shifa, do you have a
Yes,
question? Yeah, thank you.
yes, yeah. Sarah, thank you very much for a really interesting. It's afternoon where I am, so it's a really interesting afternoon listening to your research. What interests me is your methodological tools that you use. You mentioned a walking ethnography, and you're using Padlet to gather information. Can you just give me some? I've never heard of a walking ethnography. And I'm really fascinated by it. So can you tell me what are the theoretical backgrounds of the walking ethnography? Who's done it before? Is it something you've invented yourself?
Yeah, it's not something I've invented myself. I've read a lot about linguistic landscaping studies, and often that involves looking at street signs. So it's a little more unusual to look at an educational context. Usually linguistic landscapers walk streets, and they are walking. It is a walking ethnography. In that they're walking a set route and taking pictures of everything they see along the way. But what makes it different in my case, why the ethnography is there, is that I didn't report so much the data here, but I also have data on faculty and staff who I interviewed along the way as part of the second walking ethnography that I did. because there were some signs that I couldn't interpret myself because I didn't have the linguistic resources that I needed to interpret the signs. So I stopped and asked some faculty members to interpret the signs. And also I asked information about how long has this sign been here, or did you see who put this sign up? And this is the, with the sign relating to the woman who died recently, you know, the religious sign. Well, it wasn't really a religious sign, but it was a cultural sign blessing someone who had recently passed away. That sign was very interesting. I needed a lot of insight into that because I wouldn't have been able to interpret it myself without having interviewed Emirati staff who had seen a student post the sign and had insights into that. But actually, where I first saw the term walking ethnography was from Zuha's work. Zuha is, she's based in the UK, and she did a walking ethnography during COVID times, where she walked around London, or a neighbourhood of London, Golders Green, and took a lot of pictures of everything she saw, and she labelled it a walking ethnography. And I like that term because I think it does really fit. It's you're walking, you're collecting data, but you're also going deeper because you're interviewing people about the data at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to relate to the Padlet, sorry, just your second question about the Padlet, because I collected so many signs, it was impossible to get students' perspectives on all the signs because there are almost 400. So I chose 40 signs from that larger data set to present to them on the Padlet app. And they were then able to give their perspectives on the signs, which I felt made it much more interactive. So it's not only me as a researcher interpreting the signs, but students are giving their own insights. But I would say if I were to do the study again, I would do it slightly differently because the students were anonymous. But I think by keeping them anonymous, so they didn't have names attached to their comments, I think they said less than they would have said if they had their names there. And it was harder as well for me to probe some of their opinions. So I think if I were to do it again, I would request that they attach a name and then later use pseudonyms. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You have another, thank you. I have another question from Fozia. Fozia?
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Afternoon, everyone. Hello, Sarah. This is Fuzia. Thank you so much for your compelling presentation. Can you hear me all loud and clear? Yes, Sarah, thank you. You know that EMI in higher education is my cup of tea. And I'm very thankful for your presentation. And I'm more interested in EMI in North Africa, and particularly in the Maghreb countries, Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. Let me maybe seek your assistance concerning decolonization of the curriculum. You know, in Algeria, I mean, in the Maghreb countries, we are bilingual and diglossic. So
Yes.
at university, yeah, you know that French is our second language due to colonization, particularly to Algeria for more than a century. And this is why French is spoken in our Derja, which is a colloquial Algerian, and it's spoken as well as a formal language. In the higher education now, with the introduction of English as the medium of instruction, so the situation has become more intricate. So we need, well, I'm working, you know, on these, and I'm working on an edited volume with Springer, etc. And all the participation that we received, we're talking about something different from the curriculum in Algeria, which is originally a French curriculum, which we inherited from 1962. Now we have a problem in translanguaging, code switching, and Arabization, or how do we call it when we talk Arabic, but in French words. all of these exist in the Algerian context. So I'm just asking for your opinion. Shall we discuss translanguaging or code switching in Algeria? And know that some teachers who teach in French, for instance, in medicine, in biology, in architecture, sometimes they cannot code switch to Arabic simply because their first language is French, especially from Berber, or how do you call them, Tamazight. People from Bijaya, Tizi Ouzou, etc. They speak French very well, and they may consider it as the first language. So do you have any food for thought in order to solve this dilemma in North Africa?
Yeah, thank you for coming to this presentation, and I know your work, so it's really good to see you here. And also your question is very interesting. I sometimes write about this in my work, but the Emirates is quite similar in that a lot of teachers who teach in EMI universities don't share the same linguistic repertoire as their students. So the students will have Arabic and English in their repertoires and maybe other languages as well. But some teachers don't speak Arabic. In fact, many teachers don't speak Arabic. They might know a few words in Arabic, but they don't speak Arabic fluently. So it's difficult for them to embrace translanguaging in their classrooms, or it's difficult for them to lead with translanguaging. But what they can do is embrace it as a way of students communicating with students, so providing translingual spaces in the classroom. And this could involve maybe students using their L1 in group work or for projects, and then reporting back in the medium of instruction, or doing research online, multilingual research, or being creative with languages in terms of translanguaging and code switching in outputs that aren't assessed, because sometimes this is a problem as well in the UAE context, is the difference between what takes place in practice and then what's how they're being assessed, which tends to be very monolingual and strictly monolingual. So I think it's a huge issue, and it's relevant to many contexts around the world. But I do think it's important to embrace multilingualism and translingualism in these contexts. And it could also come through linguistic landscapes or semiotic landscapes by seeing different languages in the university space. That says a lot to students about how welcome they are in the space, or how welcome their languages are in the space. So I think there are many different ways to embrace translingualism. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. So the problem also lies when the teacher is not native speaker. And also it exists maybe in some parts of Algeria when the speaker is a native speaker and whose language normally is the Arabic. So this is another actually cup of tea that requires much research. And I'm very, very thankful to you for your ideas and tips, especially for the online project and the group work. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have another question, Sarah. There is someone here, Ali's asking about your connection to the institution. What was your connection to the institution where you conduct your research? And connected to that, Ramin is asking, how has your research impacted in policy in the institution? In what ways you would like to see your institution apply translanguage policies?
Yeah, they're both very good questions. So for Ali's question first, I taught at the university where the research took place for 11 years. So a very long time. And then I just left about a year ago to move back to the UK, where I'm from, for another job, but also for personal reasons too. So professional and personal reasons. But I'm still very much attached to the UAE, in that before I left, all my research has been based in the UAE, so I'm very fond of the context, and I regularly have been back since moving back to the UK for research trips and conferences. So I sort of, although I've left now, I'm still very much attached to that context. Yeah, and to talk about and to answer the second question, which was how has your research impacted policy in the university, and what would you like to see change in terms of translanguaging policies? So this is a good question. So policy at the university is and this happens in many global universities, but it's not very clear sometimes. I mean, it's an EMI university, so by the fact that it's an EMI university, instruction is through the medium of English. But what I find in practice is that teachers are their own policy makers within their own classrooms. So from interviewing teachers about their attitudes towards translanguaging, you'll get a range of different attitudes. And there'll be some teachers who believe that they must strictly follow the English-only policy and they don't accept translanguaging in their classroom. And then you'll have other teachers who are very supportive of translanguaging and try and incorporate translanguaging into their teaching. So in a way, each teacher has a different classroom policy. But in terms of the signage around the university, I think by analysing it this way, we can kind of see what the policy is just by how the linguistic landscape looks. And that is, it's bilingual, so mainly Arabic and English with a dominance of English or imbalanced bilingualism, and very little presence of other languages apart from English and Arabic. In terms of what I'd like to see change, I'd like to see more multilingualism in the university, and sort of more of an authentic representation of students' identities in the space.
Yeah, and I think that takes us to another question. Lorraine is asking, is translanguage appropriate then in an EFL context?
Yeah, it's not an EFL context though, it's an EMI context. So this is, they're not there, the students aren't there to learn English. The students are there learning their subjects through the medium of English. And also they're not in an English-speaking country or an Anglophone country. So I think it's an important question that's being asked in many global contexts. Should English medium instruction affect English medium education, or should there be spaces of belonging within this EMI setting? Should it all be about English inside and outside the classroom, or should there be more of a balance? So.
And I think you have time for one more question. Dr. Nermeen?
Yeah, it's not only actually a question, it's a contribution, because I have been teaching at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. I'm a linguist originally, and I'm working in accident investigation. So we have been teaching multiculturalism, translanguaging, and code switching in the College of Aviation to student pilots and student air traffic controllers, because we have seen that there are many accidents occurring due to the problems in communication in general. And we've been analyzing case studies, and what you have been talking about, like the problems which are occurring due to multiculturalism, and that sometimes there are things which might be misunderstood or might not be clearly stated. So we have been teaching these case studies to student pilots and air traffic controllers, student air traffic controllers also, to show them that they should be tolerable they should be more understanding to the fact that non-native speakers over the space in aviation, this is affecting safety, and it's not a matter of just speaking in good English. That wouldn't save a life, because sometimes you might be talking about something which might be misunderstood or a kind of ambiguous to the listener, and the listener don't have time to analyze and think about the linguistic impact, because they are busy about the checklist while going through trips and flights over the space. So thank you very much for raising this topic for discussion today. And I hope that more people are going to be encouraged to research it over the world, because it's really, really important. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. What you just talked about relates to another member of our group, Melanie Vanderhoven, who's doing research on communication in industrial settings, power plants. So that's a context where safety is really important as well. So it would be interesting to see how your work connects with her work in that regard. Thank you.
It's not only about the communication verbally, about language as a lingua franca. It's about also writing manuals for engineers, for people who are working in the industry in general, because sometimes you might be rephrasing a manual or writing something which is like might be misunderstood by the non-native speakers while they are reading, while they are applying the checklist, or they are following the manual, and this is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Sorry, there's only one more question here. So, about the use of L1 to teach L2. How can teachers be trained to use the correct amount of L1 and not overuse it in the English classrooms?
Yeah, this is also a good question. I think it's really context dependent, because there are some contexts where there's very little L2 in society, and therefore students really want the L2 because it's the target language when they go to the context or the study context. And so therefore using too much of the L1 might be doing them a disservice. But in the context of the UAE, it's very multilingual. English is everywhere in society. There have been many articles written on that too, as some saying it's problematic or it's too dominant in society. So it's educational contexts sort of mirror what's going on around them in the UAE anyway. Society, there's so much English. In educational context, there's so much English. So I think seeing themselves and seeing their own language in the educational context in the UAE is very important. But it does depend on the student and the teacher, because everyone will have a slightly different opinion on how much L1 is desirable in the classroom setting. So I think it's about being flexible, about embracing the possibility of translanguaging, and being open to it. I hope that helps.
Yes, thanks, Sarah. There's a couple of questions coming. Do you mind sharing your email? Maybe the participants can contact you, send you an email with questions.
Yeah.
We're having very good questions and a great conversation that we might keep going after this event ends.
I'll just put my email in the chat now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody. I don't want to take more of your time. Sarah, thanks for accepting our invitation and for being here with us. Thanks everybody for attending this event, and thanks for the great questions and conversation. Keep an eye on our future events and let us know if you have any questions. Sarah, thanks so much. Have you all a beautiful day. And talk to you soon. And hope to see you soon too. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everybody.
much.
Follow us on social media.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye.